guys, it's me, Laura. I'm a homeschooling mom of 3 kids ages 13, 11, and 6, and today I'm going to share with you some tips and tricks on early literacy and teaching to read. I did a little impromptu story series on Instagram that was helpful for a lot of people, so I thought I would take some of those aspects and pull them into a full-blown video here. I thought of breaking it up into multiple videos because there's so much to cover, but I decided I'm going to go ahead and go for it. We're going to have a long-form video. I will put timestamps below so you can skip around to whatever is helpful for you, but let's go ahead and dig into learning to read. One thing that you need to know for me before we start is that I love reading the science. I love reading the different philosophies, the different techniques. I've thoroughly looked at a lot of the learning to read programs on the market, especially for homeschoolers. Logic of English, I've looked at all about spelling, UFLI. There's so many of them. And honestly, if you're looking for a recap of all of the programs that are available and trying to figure out which one might be a good one for you, I highly recommend Sarah at Homespun Childhood. I think that's the right screen name. If not, I'll put the correct one up here and I will link her YouTube account below, but she has a wealth of information on all of the resources that are available. So one thing that you need to know about me and my experience, most of my experience is in teaching K through 2, which is the learning to read section, and tutoring, a lot of reading tutoring. I've done tutoring from grades K all the way up to college. The primary things that I have tutored are study skills as well as students who are struggling to learn to read. I have continued in my education. My husband was telling me the other day, I don't keep track of the education credits that I earn from continuing education, which I should probably be doing, but I just do it because I love it. And I love to hear more, to learn more, to know more, and to understand more. So that is my background. That is where I'm coming from. I am also someone who, when I learn all the things, I break the rules. It's kind of like when they're teaching writing in school, or at least one thing that I was always taught is that first you have to learn to follow the writing rules, and then once you understand them really well, then you can break them because you know enough to know about when to break them, how to break them, all of that. And I feel that like the same is true when it comes to education. Once you understand the philosophies, the ideas, the research that's coming out, once you keep up to date with all of that and understand it, then you take all of that and you say, okay, I'm teaching this child in front of me, so I'm not going to follow those rules exactly. I'm going to do what this child needs. And that's kind of the way that I approach education in general. That's always how I've done it. I've gotten in trouble for approaching it that way. I've also gotten recognized for approaching it that way as well. I'm not doing it for the accolades. I just really like to teach the child in front of me. And that's one of the great things about homeschool is we have the flexibility and the ability to do that. Currently, my 2 favorite programs that I have used with the child that I'm working with right now are UFLI Foundations and All About Learning. They're all about spelling and all about reading. Both of these I think would be really great as a base program. UFLI is going to be a lot quicker, a lot more succinct. You get one book, and this is for K through 2, and they've got a lot of free resources online. So as a base program, this could work really well for sure. It's definitely more repetitive in that you've got the same kinds of things that you're doing over and over again, just the same types of activities just put in a different lesson context. So if you have a student who really likes repetition, who likes to know what to expect and just get in there and get it done and move on, this is actually a really good option for them. I have a child currently that I'm teaching who has a very low attention span, and she needs a lot of repetition and to be able to stay in an area for a while before moving on. So for that reason, I have chosen All About Reading for her. And I know that in All About Reading, the program presents itself as you do All About Reading level 1, and once you've completed that, you move on to All About Spelling. I have found this to be the case most of the time. Not always, every child is different, but most of my kids do better when, like kids that I've tutored as well as my own children, when I put the 2 together, All About Spelling and All About Reading. So I've gone through and I've made a correlation of all of the lessons, and I keep that, keep that right here in the front of All About Spelling so that I can say, okay, once I finish this part of All About Reading, then I can pull in this All About Spelling and start pulling activities from there. But I do these together because I find that for so many students, when you're teaching phonics, you have what's called decoding the word, figuring out what it means. That's reading. And then you have encoding. That's where you have to make the word. So you have to figure out the sound and make the word. That is spelling. For a lot of students, they do better when you work with encoding and decoding together. However, that being said, the All About Reading program is written on the foundation that when you're trying to put in too many skills at one time, a child can't process and learn that. Their brain becomes just overwhelmed and flooded, and it's too much. And if you're noticing that in your child, by all means, break them up and do them separately. But I'm teaching the child in front of me, and this is what is working well for her. So I use this as my base. This is where we learn new concepts. This is where we kind of play some games and just really learn the new stuff and make sure that we're getting those solid skills. So a lot of times that will be referred to as intentional instruction. We're intentionally teaching a new skill, and it's done in a systematic way, meaning the order in which the spelling rules, the reading rules, the phonetic rules are taught is very systematic, and they build on each other so that all of the reading resources, everything that goes with All About Reading, the students will not be presented with passages with words that they don't know. If they haven't learned the rules for words yet, they won't be presented with them. There are a few exceptions with what they call in this program leap words, like the word the, words that are used in very high frequency, but either they don't follow the rules, or more likely, they won't learn that rule for a while because it's kind of higher up on the rule hierarchy, I guess you could say. So that is how we use this. And also UFLI is the same way in that they teach the systematic phonics. So they're not going to be throwing words at the kids that they have not learned the rules for yet. That way kids learn to focus on decoding instead of guessing words. So for some kids, this is all you'll need. This will be enough. But especially for kids who struggle or who reading doesn't come really naturally to, I would say a lot of kids are probably going to find that this is not really enough for them. The amount of practice, the type of practice that you have, even combining All About Reading and All About Spelling, isn't quite enough. A lot of kids need loads of practice to be doing lots of reading, to be doing lots of spelling and lots of activities. So that is when I will bring in a supplemental resource. So my two favorites are Explode the Code and Plaid Phonics. This is from Modern Curriculum Press. It's Plaid Phonics, and it also goes with Spelling Workout. Now, these two have a very, very, very different approach. So if your child is one who does really well memorizing the rules, that's very helpful for them. They really like to be able to decode everything and are very systematic in their thinking, I would recommend Explode the Code. This is going to align a lot better as well with what you've got going on in All About Reading. It's not an exact alignment, but it's going to be a lot better. One thing I like is that there's plenty of work to do. Usually you would do 2 of these books approximately in a year. Now, if you find that you do the level 4 book, but that's still not enough practice, they have level 4.5. So you can match up those lessons and do them together, or you can do level 4 and then go back over everything again in 4.5. And it's going to be the same stuff, just different activities. And then they also, will have level 5, level 5.5, and so on and so forth. This is a great way to practice. And again, it's going to have a lot more familiar things that your kids are learning in All About Reading. Another option is the Plaid Phonics along with Spelling Workout, which you can add this part or not, depending on how much practice your kids need. So this is going to take a different approach. While they do teach systematic phonics, they're also going to have a lot more sight words, a lot more words that your child won't be able to decode yet. They will often separate these out, not always, but this is great for kids who maybe the rules are overwhelming, but they still need lots of practice, but they don't like memorizing all the rules. Or maybe they just really, for some kids, if they have to wait a couple years to start reading, like I think usually you can't pick up like an early reader book from All About Reading program, if you're going through All About Reading program, until you're done with level 2. For some kids, that's just an end all for them because they want to be able to read those books. So something like this is going to give them exposure to more of those other words as well, while still completing a systematic phonics routine. So what I'm going to do is I am going to show you how I use these programs. So I'm going to take a look with, I'll take a look at UFLI and All About Spelling, and then I'm also going to take a look inside Explode the Code, showing how I would use that. And then I'm going to kind of do, this one will be pretty long, but I'm going to show you inside these. And what I'm going to show you is not just, oh, this is how the lesson's laid out, this is the way it works. I'm going to show you ways that you can adapt, ways that you can teach, ways that you can use these resources to your advantage. And one thing to remember with all of these resources, these are curricula. These are not rules, they're not laws. So you can adjust and tweak the program to fit the needs of your child. The goal is helping your child learn with as little frustration as possible. That does not mean your child will never get frustrated, and that does not mean that things are never going to be hard, but you don't want to push them past the point of frustration. You don't want it to be a daily battle. You want this to be something fun for the most part, and something that it feels like an accomplishment from them. So I'm going to move my setup over to my desk, show you inside some of these books and kind of how I use things, and hopefully you can learn a few things that way. And if you have any questions along the way about any of this, please leave them in the comments below. There's no way that I could cover every possible situation in these videos, and different students have different needs. So it's kind of fun to think creatively, for me, to think creatively about how each student needs to have a subject or a topic or education as a whole addressed so that they can get the most out of their learning. That excites me like beyond belief. So anyway, I'm gonna turn this around now. Before we dive into the books, I just wanted to talk a little bit about scheduling all of this. So when a child is learning to read, especially a child who struggles, it takes a lot of work and a lot of practice, and it will take a different amount depending on your child. However, that doesn't all need to be done in one setting, and you can certainly spread it out throughout the day. Figure out what your child's tolerance is, and I would aim for just slightly below that absolute tolerance level per session. So for us, we have 4 different times during the day when we touch on reading and phonics based learning. So for example, we might be doing handwriting, and then I would have her read one story as a practice for me from whatever reader or review book that she is reading from. And if I find that her stamina won't let her get through one story, that's fine. We'll do half a story. So we kind of pick what's going to work, and that'll be one time during the day. That's all we'll do. Another time during the day, we might sit down and do our all about reading or all about spelling. That's usually done in the form of some kind of game or activity. I always try to keep it really fun. This is just, that's where she'll learn the new skill, and then we'll keep practicing the skill usually for about a week. For example, if you have this lesson here, we would blend the letter tiles and do this whole activity of learning the new skill, and that would be one day. That would be all we would do. And then another day we would do the bingo activity, and then another day we would do the word match. I might put those together depending on how she's doing and where she's at, or I might keep them separately. And then another day we might do a game or an activity that utilizes the fluency sheet or the word cards, and that kind of is how we spread it out so that it takes longer. She's getting more touches with the material, and we're spreading it out over more days. So that is kind of how we do this, and that's all we do for that session when we sit down together. We have another section where usually I'll pair this with piano or something else that we do together, but for this she'll usually just do, let's see, like we'll read this together one day and do this activity, and then the next day she might do this activity, the next day she might do this activity, or she might do the whole page, just depending on it, on how she's doing. And then this again, we'll either do one whole page or we'll break it up depending on how things are going and what else she's doing that day. And so again, we break this up into very small bite-sized pieces. And then for phonics, sometimes we'll do this along with the game session, depending on how long that takes. Sometimes we'll put it in with something else. But when we sit down to do her phonics workbook, again, we will do one page front and back. And if she's having an off day and that's too much, that's fine. We'll just do the one page. But that is kind of how we break it down. And again, this is not all at the same time. This is broken up in different pieces throughout the day. I'm going to show you how we use some of these resources. So I am not going to go into depth with UFLI. We have used this. I've used it with her. It works great for some things, and I think it could be really great as a base. Like I said, I recommend UFLI for kids who like the same structure and don't like a lot of change. Some kids, when they have a lot of change, learning a new structure can actually prohibit them from learning the new material. Other kids, they get bored with the same structure to the point that they can't stay engaged with the material. So you're going to have to know your child, and you can test things out and see what is best. But this is a really great program. One thing I love about UFLI Foundations is that in the front of the book here, there is a ton of information that is super helpful for anybody who's teaching phonics to young children. I highly recommend that if you get this program, you read these pages. It does tell you how to use the program, how the program is specifically written, but it just has a lot of really great information about teaching phonics, period. So when you come here, I'm just going to turn somewhere in the middle. So they usually recommend that a lesson take about 2 days to complete. So you're going to do part of this in one day and part of this in another. And there's some things that you're going to kind of switch around. It goes over all of that in the introduction, like how you can separate this out and how you can do this. Now, let me tell you, you can change that if you need to. If you need to spread this out over a week, you can do that. Maybe you want to do the phonemic awareness drills every single day. And you just do a few of the words, right? Like you might do one word from each section a day, or whatever the case may be. You take these drills and you split them up in the way that you need them. There's also always a word list over here that's going to have more words that you can do these activities with. Some of them are going to be a little bit harder. Some of them are going to be a little bit easier. And this is going to help you be able to expand that. So you can use these to do more phonemic awareness. So some of the same thing, just more words. You can do some of the visual drills. You can use that for this. Another thing to know about this program is that they have a lot of free online resources that go with it. When I was using this with my daughter, what I did, they have pre-built slideshows for every single lesson. And so what I did is I went in, I used those slideshows and I adjusted them. I would move things around. I would add a few extra slides. And at the end, I always had a really fun like GIF with one of her favorite characters, cartoon characters, or an animal that she loved or something, kind of dancing to say, yeah, you did it. And that was really helpful for her. So they do have those base slides, which are going to have all of the things that are in here that you need to complete the activities. It's going to walk you through. It also shows your child how much of the lesson you have left to do, what you've already done. So that can be really helpful. They also have the blending board, which is going to be an activity kind of like tiles, like you might use with letter tiles, but you do it on the board up front. So you're switching letters out, and by switching letters, you make new words and you build word chains. So that's a really great resource. They also will have decodable readers. So these start out as just sentences and they're like one-page readers. They get more advanced as the kids get older, but they're usually on a page and there's a space to draw a picture. You can use that to do copy work with. You can use that to pay attention to what's going on here, but you really have a lot to work from. But this is basically every lesson. So even if I look at this here, when I move forward, there's just a little bit of adding on, but it's basically the same kind of format that you've still got. Even as I go higher up, it's the same basic element. You're just applying it to different diagraphs, different vowel teams, all of that. So it's basically the same thing. But again, you can take this information and use it and play with it and present it in different ways. But this is an excellent base of a resource. I also like this one because it's very cost effective. So if you are working with a tight budget, this is also a really good option. You just have to get the book. Everything else is free online, and this will take you from kindergarten through the end of 2nd grade. I'm also going to link below to Sarah's walkthrough of UFLI. She does an excellent job of explaining this particular program more. I think she has used, while I have used this program and am familiar with it, I have not used it as extensively as she has. So her insights are really helpful. Next, we're going to talk about all about reading and all about spelling and how I use them together and kind of what we do. So I'm going to tell you right now, if you are someone who will read the about section and the way this program is supposed to be implemented, and you only feel comfortable using it that way, this section in the video I recommend skipping, because I definitely do not follow this program as it was written to be used. I think that it is a great base though. And the reason that I have gone with this one as my base is because they do have so many games, so many activities, and especially since adding the spelling activities in as well. And also the readers are so good and so engaging, and all of my kids have loved them. I felt like those were the things that were going to be hardest for me to recreate or hardest for me to tweak. So that is why I ultimately went with this program. So what I do is we use all about reading as the basis for everything. So as I said earlier, we do not sit down and try to do one lesson at a time. We do not set a timer. It's recommended that when you start a lesson, you set a timer for 20 minutes, you get as far as you can, and then you pick up in the same place the next day. That's not what we do. That doesn't work for us. So what we do is I usually honestly skip the review. I find that just this type of review, not using things in context and it being a flashcard based review, is not helpful for my child. We do play the games, we do use the cards, we don't start with a review. There are 53 lessons in this book, so I'm going to start with showing you one that's kind of, mid-range lesson right here. This is words with initial blends. And as you can see, I have a sticky note here that lets me know that there is an all about spelling lesson that goes with this. Again, I'll show you how that correlates here in a minute. So when I come to this lesson, I'm going to skip the review because we review in other ways and I don't want to take the time for that. My goal here is to teach new skills, to teach the new rules, to introduce them. That is my goal with this. That is all. So I would, for one lesson, I would do this activity. Depending on how long that takes, depending on her attention span, when we get to this lesson, I may do this as well. This is, we would pull out the tiles, we might pull out other hands-on things, and it would just be fun, and that would be it. That would be all that we do for the day. Then the next day, we might choose to do the word flippers. So I would prep those, get those ready. I might also decide to do that in another format. I might use tiles again if she's really liking tiles, but that would be all that we would do on that day. Then the next day we might do this how animals move. Again, we might put these together on the same day depending on her level of attention that day. And then we would play a game where on the next day, this would be a completely different game, where we're using these cards where she can practice reading. So they have so many games and resources I might use for this. Since there's not a game built in, they do have lots of game ideas in the back for using the cards. I might use one of those game ideas. I might use an activity from the Games with Ziggy book. I also might use an activity from one of the add-on activity books that they have now. I think they have one with birds of a feather. They have one with bugs, I think they just released. And then there's another one with animal, like water animals. I think they're coming out with more of those. So we might choose a game from there, but we would do a game that day. Then in this particular lesson, there is a leap word. So I might go online and find a really engaging printable to do the word to with. And then we're getting to the fluency sheet. A lot of times I don't like using these because they're painful. So we may choose to do a game out of this, or we may skip it altogether. And that is what we'll do there. Then once we've completed that, we're not done with this lesson yet. So then I'm going to go on to lesson 15 and all about spelling. And this is going to be the same rule. So at this point, we're still doing initial blends. So I'm going to come through here again. I'm not going to pay any attention to this review section. We're going to be reviewing in other ways. We would do this segmenting game because that's really important when it comes to blending words. So we would play this game and do this worksheet along with it. That would be one day. That would be all that we've done. Then we're going to take these cards, which are going to be slightly different than the ones in All About Reading, but they're still working on the same skill, and we would play a different game with these words. And then we might do some more games or activities, again, from the activity book, where she would be writing these words out. Could be on a board, like a whiteboard. She could be using a chalkboard. She could be doing it on pieces of paper, but we're going to take some of these words and do a game out of them. If she's not got it by then I might take some of these words and build in other ways. So I don't by any means feel like I have to finish this practice more words section. If she's got it, we will just move on. But if she needs more work, this is an amazing bank of words to pick from that we can use to build the skills that she's doing. So here, there's also another built-in game here called Wash the Dishes that we would play. And they do have, in the workbook, they have word searches. This is a little tricky for mine right now, but if your child likes that, that's another option of something you can do to continue to practice that skill that you're learning. But again, I would separate these, not do them all in one day. And then this is really fun to dictate the phrases. Again, you can do as many of these as your child has the stamina for. And once you feel like they've got the concept, you can move on. There's also this section for older kids with more difficult words. So that is kind of how we would do that. Just break it up little by little until she's got it. And then once I feel like she's got it pretty well, at least good enough to be functional, then we move on. I don't feel like she has to have it completely mastered because these skills we're going to keep practicing in the other books that I'm going to show you. Now we're going to be moving on to some supplemental workbook type materials. Now, I know when I was teaching, we were going through a phase, which I think this is still the case in some places, where we were not really supposed to use worksheets at all. However, and for kindergarten, however, I had some students who were really struggling, and I didn't do what my boss told me that I had to do, and I pulled out a workbook for two of my kids that were struggling anyway, because I felt like for those particular kids and what I was observing, I thought that the workbooks would be helpful for them. And I was absolutely right. It was what they needed to make a change. So no, I don't advocate using tons of workbooks, but I also feel like some kids actually like workbooks and some kids really thrive from using them. So I don't like to be an always or never kind of person when it comes to education. So if you have a child that will benefit from this additional work, I definitely recommend either Explode the Code or Plaid Phonics. Again, Explode the Code is going to be a lot more systematic, a lot more rule-based. You're not going to run into words that you haven't learned the rules for yet. So if that's something that's going to be helpful, I recommend this book. So and this is level 4. This is higher than I would like. I couldn't find my levels 1, 2, or 3 anywhere. And this is a book that's been done by one of my kids, but we're going to look at it anyway. So when you have a lesson, you're going to have a rule. Sometimes these rules are not rules. They're not taught in the same way that they would be taught in All About Spelling or All About Reading. So you can certainly adjust however you need to, and you're going to practice. So here, they're working on breaking up syllables between 2 consonants. When a word has 2 consonants that come between 2 vowels, the word is divided into 2 syllables between the 2 consonants. So in this case, napkin, and so you would divide it in between the 2 consonants that come together. So with our programs that we were working on, we were already scooping our syllables. So we scooped, we didn't put the line in between. You do that whichever way makes sense for your child. That is a way that you can certainly adapt. And then, you know, as you're going through here, we also just talked about breaking down syllables differently, and that's okay. So we would talk about what this says and say, okay, how does that match with what we've already learned? If this is a new rule, you might wait to get to it, or you can just say, okay, this is the way that they talk about the rule, and it does work that way, but we're going to learn a little bit more about that rule as we move on. There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of phrase that. So I would recommend, for depending again on your child's stamina level, doing 1 page front and back per day, and that's it. So you would do 1 page front and back. Here you're finding the correct syllable breakdowns. Here you've got each syllable separated, and then you're writing the words. Here you are looking at the word, circling the picture, and writing the word again. These were always a hit for my kids. They're really funny phrases, and they're just asking. They have to read the question and then answer yes or no. So in here, the chances of you running into a word that your kids can't decode is very slim. So they should be able to read these on their own by the time they get here. But you know what? If they're having a hard time, that's okay. You help them with the word, and it should be good to go. And then again, they're reading the sentences and putting the word in. Then they'll have another silly sentence that goes with the picture, and they're picking the correct one. And because they've already seen these pictures a number of times in their lessons, they should know what the picture is, and they're going to write it on the line from memory, or decoding, or however you want to say it without looking at the word. They're going to sound it out and write it. And then that is a lesson. And so then you're going to go to another lesson and do it that way. So that's the way Explode the Code works. It's pretty straightforward. Like I said, if you really want to focus on only decodable words, this is a really, really good option. Now we're going to look at Plaid Phonics. Who would I recommend this for? I would recommend this for students who get frustrated with all of the rules, who have a hard time memorizing the rules for the phonics, the spelling rules and all of that. I would recommend this for students who really want to be exposed to words that they can't decode so that they can read more outside of just things that are strictly decodable. I think that for those kinds of students, this would be a really good option. And it's just an alternative. This one's more colorful. So if that's really important versus the Explode the Code, that might be good. And this one has more varied activities in it. So again, if your child gets bored really quickly, Explode the Code is there's a lot of activities in one lesson, but the lessons don't change very much from lesson to lesson. And for these, the lessons are much longer. So even if the activities are similar, it's going to stretch out longer. So those are some things to consider when you're trying to figure out between the two, which ones you might use. So when you go to Plaid Phonics, it is broken down into units. So you've got your consonants, and then you're going to focus on short vowel sounds. And then within the unit, you have a lesson, which, I mean, that's not really what they call it. I don't know, chapter, lesson, maybe chapter. So you've got a chapter on short vowels, and then A, E, I, O, U kind of breaks that up. Only it ends with E, which is kind of a tricky one. So that's probably why they do that. And so you're just going to go through this way. So each lesson is going to start here. You're going to have a little poem that should be mostly decodable for kids. So what I would do is I would go through ahead of time. And I think that my child, when she gets to this, can read all the words except for 8 because that has some skills that we don't know. So I will highlight that word ahead of time, usually just use a colored pencil and color it in, and I'll tell her, hey, this word you haven't learned the rules for, so I don't know if you are going to be able to read it. Do you want to try, or do you want me to just read that word for you? If it's a word that I think that she can do, but that will be tricky, then I'll just circle it and I'll say, okay, I think you can do this one. Let's give it a try, and encourage her to try it more. Because we don't want the kids to be guessing at words, but we also don't want them to feel afraid to try a word that they haven't learned the rules to yet. So that's what I would do with this section. And then for this one, they're just going to go through and circle the picture that has the sound. I would do this with them. Sometimes the pictures are tricky, and what matters more is they get the right sound. So even if they're calling a picture the wrong thing from what the publisher intends, as long as what they're calling it matches the way they answer the question. So this is a mitt. If they called it a glove, they would not circle it. If they called it a mitt, they would circle it. And you can choose to correct them to come to the correct conclusion, which is mitt, or you can just say, okay, glove. Does glove have that? Either way, totally fine. This is about learning the skill of the short I sound. So that's what your goal is. And then here, you're going to be looking at the words that rhyme in the sentence or in the pictures and color them. Again, the same kind of situation. If they call something different, you either guide them to what the picture is supposed to be, or you just let them answer based on what they're seeing in that picture. Here you have the words. So they're going to read the words and pick the one that matches the picture best. With all of these, they're pretty good. You do have, I mean, this is before they really have gone over blends or double letters. So if you're looking at a word like will or milk or mitt, all of those are potential to be a little challenging and might kind of make your students stop and be like, oh wait, what do I do here? So this would be a time where if they're struggling, you say, oh man, this one's hard and we haven't learned the rules yet for this one, so let me explain it to you. So this has more sounds in the word than we're used to. This is milk. Milk. Or I'd say, okay, this one's tricky because it has 2 T's at the end. But when we have 2 T's at the end of the word like that, we only make 1 T sound. So if I cover this up, and we'll learn later when to use that double letter, but if I cover this up and you read it that way, what word is it? So I might help them out, do things like that. Again, these have the nk, which can be challenging. Help them out. This is about practice and exposure. This is supposed to not be too hard. This is supposed to be fun. So if you have to help them more in this book, that is okay, because this is all about exposure and this is all about giving them practice. This is not about testing. This is not about mastery. This is just practice, 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 and giving them lots of exposure. So this one, again, they're going to color the words that have the short I sound, and then they're going to write a sentence. For this, it's good to have them write as much of the sentence as they can, but if they're having troubles, certainly you can help them, but trying to push them towards as much independence in this is good. So next you're going to have a blending activity. For this activity, you're just blending the sounds together, practicing w-ik, wig, putting the sounds together, and they're going to circle the picture that goes with it. And here, these are tricky because they're going to find, sometimes they have them match to the rhyming words and sometimes they have them match to the picture. So this is a good time where it's good to point out the importance of reading directions, because even though the pages look the same, the instructions might be slightly different from time to time. So they're going to blend, they're going to write the word, and in this case, they're drawing to connect it to the picture that matches the word. Next, they're moving on to the same stuff that they've been doing, but they have to provide some of the letters for the word. So in this case, depending on their stamina, you can have them trace the gray letter and write the whole word, or you can just have them write the letters that are missing, find the first sound and the last sound in the word. That's totally up to you and where your child's at. Again, about exposure. This is about once they've done this work every day, like over time, they're getting so much more exposure to these words in different ways. That's really going to help them read. It's going to help them learn to pay attention to the sounds. And then you get to a page like this. So this is tricky because a lot of the stuff in the sentence, they may not be able to read. Like I might be tricky because we haven't really learned the long sound of I yet. So I would probably help her with that. But if you need to, you can read this part of the sentence and let them find the missing words. But I'll encourage my child to read, or my student or whoever I'm working with, to read as much as they can. I know that does is really hard. I do not expect them to know that. So I've got that colored in. These are tricky words, but I think they can figure them out. So I've underlined them. I should probably underline that one as well. Swim is a little tricky. And so we read through, but the goal here is for them to find the correct word to fill in the space. So if you have to do this part, that's fine. You think of the goal of the page and you work with the child to help them achieve that goal. That's how you approach this. So they would circle the word and write it over here. And then here we've got the same type of activity we've been working with, but there are no letters provided, so the child has to write them all. Now, if your child is struggling with some dysgraphia or something that makes writing really hard, you can by all means break this up into 2 different days. You don't have to finish it in one day. There's no rules like that. So, or you can say, okay, we're just going to do the odds, and then you just go on to the next assignment. You don't even have to finish it. Or we're just going to do the evens, and then you go on to the next assignment, and that's all you do. This is, again, a tool for practice to help your child learn. So this one is one where the sentences are definitely ones that you are going to read and let them fill in. Find the word that finishes the sentence. So again, you're reading this part, and then they're finding the word and putting that in. And then at the end, we have a story. And so the idea is that they can read this story by themselves. I do find that a lot of times there are words in here that are not decodable. For example, little. That is not a word that she knows. So I would highlight that word and I would read that. But I think all of the rest of this she can do. Now, if there's a passage where it's mostly words your child cannot read with a few that they can, you flip that. So then you highlight the words you think that they can read. You read the rest. When you get to one of those highlighted words, you let them read it, and then you keep going. You want them to be able to do these things. So you're going to do everything that you can to make it doable for them. So then after you read it, they have a few questions to answer where they're going to fill in the blank with words from the story. And then you finish off usually with an activity like this. Oh wait, I guess you're not quite finished yet. There's 2 more things. One more thing after this. So this activity, what they're doing is they're taking the ending, so in this case it's the ing ending, and they're going to make actual words with these. So you try it. Ring, is that a word? Yes. Okay, so you write it on the line. Sing, is that a word? Yes, you write it on the line. Ning, is that a word? No, that's not a real word, so you don't write it on the line. Now, one thing that can help sometimes for students, keeping track of this information on a page like this can be tricky. So if you have some kind of letter tiles, you can print them out from the computer. They don't have to be anything fancy. You can even just you could cut these out. I mean, make a copy and cut them out, or just cut them out even if you wanted to, so that your child can like put the letter in front to try it. That might be more helpful. You can certainly do that. And then once the letter's there, they can copy the whole word if they need to. So whatever you need to do to make this doable for your child. And again, you're going to help them write this sentence as much as they can do on their own. They certainly will. So this is where you're definitely going to run into the most issues with this particular book, is the high frequency words. So if this is frustrating for your child, absolutely skip this lesson. Don't do it. Totally fine. But what I like to do is I like to say, okay, these are tricky words. We see them a lot when we read, but we haven't learned the rules to read these words yet. So when we get to them, we might not know what to do. So I would say, these are the words that we're looking at. You, that's funny. Y-O-U, you, that's not how that would sound to me. And I would talk about it. Like, are, for, down. Anyway, we would talk about all the words and read them. Then I would read this sentence and I would say, Men and Tim blank playing in the sand. And I would go through, probably randomly go through this list. Men and Tim do playing in the sand. Does that make sense? Is that right? No. Men and Tim are playing in the sand. Oh, that's right. Are. Okay, can you look at this word are and write it down there? I might circle it, and then once she's done, cross it out so that that makes it easy. I find that when you circle the word they're working on, they know where to focus, but then you have to make sure to cross it out when you're done so that they don't get distracted by that word later. That can be helpful for sure. So this is just exposure to some of those high frequency words. We're not looking for mastery here, but exposure can help. And you'd be surprised to know how many words that stick with them. And over time, as they're doing their own reading, they can pick up on those words. So then lastly, there's going to be some kind of crossword that goes with those high frequency words that they're doing. Again, if you find it helpful, you can use letter tiles to put in the place here. Sometimes kids have a hard time tracking the ones that are up and down. So if you need to cover other stuff with sticky notes or paper so that they can only see what they're looking at, that can be helpful as well. That takes you to the end of the lesson for the short I sound. So that is how I would use this, and I wouldn't worry about how long it takes to get through it. Just go through it at the correct pace. If you still need more practice, I would bring in the spelling workout book. And this, you're going to have to take a completely different approach to. This is a spelling book, not a reading book. Come into this knowing that they're going to need a lot more help reading the stuff. That's totally fine. So I'm going to pick a random lesson here. When you look at a lesson, they want you to see the words that you're going to be doing for spelling in context, to see how you would use them in the real world. So every lesson is going to start with this reading part. So I recommend, again, either going through and keeping track of the words that your child can read if there are more that they cannot, or keep track of the words that your child will not be able to read. And you can either read this whole thing to them or let them help you, depending on how it is. I do recommend trying to let them read the bold words. Those are going to be their spelling words. But in this case, book, we have not learned about the double O, and we will not for a while. I am not crazy about the fact that it's a spelling word, but I do not think it will hurt for my child, for her particular personality, to say, oh, when we have an OO together, it says, we're going to spend a lot more time learning about this. And if you need help for this with this word while we do this lesson, that is totally fine. I can help you with it because we haven't learned it yet. But we're still going to practice spelling it because it's kind of fun to say the word book. So we would do that. We would read over the spelling tips, and then we would do this page in one day. Now, one thing I've noticed with some students is that this is a numbered list. This is a numbered list. 1 goes with 1, 2 goes with 2, 3 goes with 3, 4 goes with 4. That's not the way it works, but in their mind, that is the way that it works, and anything different is so confusing. So if that's the case, I would write, I might even cover this with a sticky note, honestly. I would write the words, even with them, on a separate piece of paper, on a separate sticky note that you can move around from lesson to lesson, whatever you need to do. And I would write the words out, 6. And with them, how do we spell that? 6. You can even let them write the words if they're able to do that, whatever you need to do. But then I would use that as your list that you take from page to page, so they're not worried about the numbers. Don't put numbers on them, just write the words. And then they're going to come through, and again, based on their writing ability, they're either going to trace and do pop, or you can just have them write the P, depending on where they're at. So that would be one day. The next day, we would work on these activities. Again, this is where having that sticky note would be helpful because they can put it right, like they can cover this while they're working on that, or cover this while they're working on that, and put the words in correctly. Across and down, all of that is going to be tricky, but I can tell you they use so many crosswords in these books, they will have it down by the time they're done. The kids will know how to do it, but you can definitely help them with that. It's also really tricky to learn to put one letter in each box, but again, you can help them with that too, and then they'll write the rhyming word for each picture. And then I will often break these up into 2 days depending on how things are going, but you're going to use that sticky note again so you don't have the number issue, and you're going to read these sentences to them and they're going to figure out what word goes there. And here they have a writing prompt. Now it can be really fun to take this writing prompt out and put it in a notebook. So if you have like an art book, they can write their sentence on one side and then make a watercolor picture or whatever on the next side. Sometimes people like School Nest notebooks, so the top part you can draw the picture, on the bottom they can write it. But this can be really fun. It's kind of like a writing journal and gives them an opportunity to do writing on their level once a week. Again, you want them to write as much as they can, but you are welcome to help them too. But we want them to try to, especially words that they're able to decode, we want them to try, and we want them to know that if they get it wrong at this stage, that's okay. You just want them to try. So that is a lesson in spelling. I'm sure I missed a few things in that flip through, but even if you're not using these exact resources, my hope is that that walkthrough will kind of help you have an idea of how to approach things if your child's struggling, or how to make things work and tweak them for your needs. So if you have any questions at all, please leave them below. If it's something I can answer in the comments section, I will for sure do that. But if you'd like to see another video or another walkthrough, or me to explain something more, please let me know. I'm happy to do that. This is really what I love about education, is this piece right here. This is my favorite thing. It's part of why I loved teaching, why I loved tutoring. This is what I really love most about homeschool. So I'm definitely happy to answer your questions or help the best that I can. And I hope that you guys are having a great day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.